God not only sees what we do, he sees why we do it. So whatever you're doing, you need to be doing for the glory of the Lord. The actions may be good, but the motives can still be wrong. They can still be sinful. And so we need to check our motives. Everything that we do should be for the glory and the honor of the Lord. The Davidic Covenant. Solomon was the near fulfillment. Jesus was the future fulfillment. Jesus would come the first time to save us from our sin, to pay the penalty on the cross for our sin. And he will come back again the second time. We're still waiting for that, for his second coming, where he will rule and reign on the earth for 1,000 years, the millennial reign. So yeah, we're looking forward to that. But all of that is part of this Davidic covenant that's established, like I said, in 2 Samuel 7 and here in 1 Chronicles 17. Very, very, very important chapter in the Bible that you all need to be familiar with. But from a human perspective, King David has a son who becomes king, who has a son who becomes king, and so on and so on and so on. That's the facts. From a spiritual perspective, God is putting in motion the coming of the ultimate king, Jesus. The next several chapters, chapters 18 through 20, record many of David's military victories. God gave him great success, great victory over his enemies. And from a human perspective, David was awesome. David was the man. From a spiritual perspective, the Lord gave David victory wherever he went. And then in chapter 21, the kingdom is prosperous and at peace, which should be a good thing. But I think that we've all had the experience of when things are going really well and prosperous and success is out there, sometimes we have moral failings. We're more vulnerable to moral failings, and that's where David was. It says in in chapter 21, verse 1, then Satan stood against Israel and incited David to number Israel. So David conducts a census. He counts the people. And God's not happy about it. It's not the counting that was the problem. It was the motive behind the counting. Because God had ordered a census many times in history. And so it wasn't the counting of the people. It was David's motives for the counting of the people. Because he wanted to know how many people were following him. He wanted to know how many people were in his army, because he was starting to take more confidence in his power and his authority and his army than he was in God. And so God wasn't happy about it. It was a pride issue. See, God not only sees what we do, he sees why we do it. So whatever you're doing, you need to be doing for the glory of the Lord. And when we do things for the glory of ourselves, like feeding the poor is a wonderful thing to do. But if you're doing it for your own recognition and your own pat on the back and for people to tell you how great you are, well, then you're doing it from the wrong motives. The actions may be good, but the motives can still be wrong. They can still be sinful. And so we need to check our motives. Because everything that we do should be for the glory and the honor of the Lord. David's motives were wrong, and God called him out on it. 70,000 men died. And David humbled himself and repented. We see in 1 Chronicles 21:17. And David said to God, was it not I who gave command to number the people? It is I who have sinned and done great evil. But these sheep, what have they done? Please, let your hand, O Lord my God, be against me and against my father's house, but do not let the plague be on your people. So he took responsibility for his sin, and he repented, and the Lord had mercy and compassion on him. The rest of the book of 1 Chronicles is David gathering the materials and the supplies and getting the people together to build the temple. Solomon will be the one that actually builds the temple, but David is helping to get prepared for that. Look at 1 Chronicles 22, verse 7. It says, David said to Solomon, my son, I had it in my heart to build a house for the name of the Lord my God, but this word of the Lord came to me. You have shed much blood and have fought many wars. You were not to build a house for my name, because you have shed much blood on the earth in my sight. But you will have a son who will be a man of peace and rest, and I will give him rest from all his enemies on every side. His name will be Solomon, and I will grant Israel peace and quiet during his reign. He is the one who will build a house for my name. He will be my son, and I will be his father, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom over Israel forever. And see, I love this because David didn't just get all whiny and upset about it and be like, Solomon, why does he get to build the temple? I wanted to build the temple. It was my idea. Why does he get to do it? He didn't do that. No, he just jumped up. He started getting everything together. He started collecting all the materials. He started organizing the people and making sure that Solomon had everything that he needed to be successful. And that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be in our churches. That's the way it should be in our ministries. Because we're all in this together. We all have a role to play. We're all on the same team, and every role is important. So instead of fussing and bickering because we don't get to do what we wanted to do, we need to jump in there and support everyone and support each other and be each other's greatest encouragers and greatest cheerleaders, because we're all on the same mission, and we need to help each other to accomplish our mission. So David, he didn't complain. He just set out to gather everything and make sure that Solomon would be successful and had everything that he needed. And so chapters 23 and 28 are all about the running of the temple and the positions in the temple and what they were to do, what they were to be responsible for. And then 1 Chronicles ends with chapter 29, verse 26. It says, David, son of Jesse, was king over all Israel. He ruled over Israel 40 years, 7 in Hebron and 33 in Jerusalem. He died at a good old age, having enjoyed long life, wealth, and honor. His son Solomon succeeded him as king. So from a human perspective, the great King David had died. From a spiritual perspective, David's purpose had been fulfilled in his lifetime, and God's plans were continuing on in the next generation. But not just God's plans for Solomon, but God's plans for all mankind was playing out. For all mankind. For us. For us. I think that's just incredible to me. I love it. I love it when you can look back and see what God was doing. So I encourage you to take time to look back at your own life and see what God has been doing in your own life, because God is always active. God has a plan for our lives. But that, my friends, is 1 Chronicles. We covered all of 1 Chronicles. It's amazing. I know. We made it. But I want to give you real quickly the Cliff Notes to the Cliff Notes. Okay, because if you don't leave here today knowing anything or remembering anything from this message, I want you to remember that the Israelites, that David, a man after God's own heart, that they were not perfect, that they made a lot of mistakes, that there were times when they strayed, there was times when they didn't consult God, there was times when they whined and complained and sinned, and God still loved them, and God still had a plan for them. And that's us. That's us. We're not perfect. You're never going to be perfect. But David was known as a man after God's own heart because he always returned back to God. He always went to God and he confessed and he repented and he got back on track. Did he get off track again? Yes, he did. Very often. But he always repented and turned back to God. And that's what God asks of us. He always wants us to just return to him. And our relationship with him grows. So I know that there's people here this morning that need to return to him. You've gotten off track. You've been doing things your way for way too long, and it's time to start doing them God's way. He'll bless you for it. He'll bless you for it. He has a plan, a very good plan for your life. I encourage you to look back and see what he has done in your life. I look back over my life and I think, over 20 years ago, there was a couple that came to church here, and I just introduced myself to them, was nice to them. A few months later, they invited me to their wedding. I went to their wedding, and I met my husband at their wedding. And I know that that was God's plan. From the moment that he gave them the desire to walk through those front doors, he had a plan for me, and it was playing out. God does those things in our lives if we just pay attention. And even through bad things, you can look at some bad times in your life and you can see that God was doing something. He was bringing you to something because he has a plan and he loves you.